Sugarhill Gang's Rapper's Delight isn't a hip-hop record. I know, it's brave of me to say, but really, Rapper's Delight is often looked at as the first hip-hop record, but there's no way in which that's true.
I said the hip hop, the hip it to the hip hop, you don't stop the rocket to the bang bang boogie, say up jump the boogie to the rhythm of the boogie beat.
In early 1979, the feeling in New York was that hip-hop was ready to move from the clubs and the parks onto wax. But when Sylvia Robinson first approached some of these established acts, they didn't give her the time of day. She came to rule releases across the early 80s, but neither her nor her label, Sugarhill Records, were a known quantity in 1979. And hell, a bunch of early hip-hop groups didn't even like tapes being passed around of their shows, so they sure as hell weren't going to press a record. So when I say Rapper's Delight isn't a hip-hop record, this is part of what I mean. It didn't come from the culture. It didn't come from the figureheads of Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, Afrika Bambaataa, Grandmaster Caz.
I'm the CAS and the OVA and the rest is FLY. The cat who bit this rhyme was my manager. Pure treason, I'll tell you why.
Big Bank Hank of the Sugarhill Gang was managing the Cold Crush Brothers and by extension Grandmaster Caz before he made the deal with Sugarhill Records. At the time, Caz was surprised to hear that Hank was going to make a record, but he paid it little mind as that just wasn't where the business was in '79.
I knew what it was. I knew what it was, but I didn't know it was gonna be. I didn't know it was gonna come out. I didn't know it was gonna be on the radio. I didn't know. You know what I mean? No MC had made a record.
All right, so
Busy B didn't have a record. Melly Mel didn't have a record. Nobody had a record. Why would I think that Hank was gonna make a record and it was gonna come out?
What did surprise him though was hearing Hank on the radio performing rhymes that Caz had written. And this is another part of why Rapper's Delight isn't really a hip-hop song. It's a song and a style stolen. Hip-hop culture didn't consider it a hip-hop song, because how could you have a group if you didn't have a DJ? As Hanif Abdurraqib puts it, the MC was secondary. At the inception of the culture, the DJ was the star. The DJ held all the power because it was the DJ who held at their fingertips the ability to persuade people to move. Not only was this a new group on a new label reciting stolen rhymes, but it wasn't even a real hip-hop group. Then again, maybe that's too restrictive a view of hip-hop. But Rapper's Delight isn't even the first record we could argue was hip-hop in 1979. That honour belongs to the Fatback Band and their B-side, King Tim III. And this song was much more in the vein of live hip-hop at the time. It was funky and it wasn't just exclusively rap. Fatback even performed with pioneer DJ Pete Jones on several occasions. As such, they were as close to the culture as Sugarhill Gang were. And hell, at least they had a reputation. I like the idea that Fatback came first, and that they lost out in our collective mind due to the record just not being as commercially successful as Sugarhill Gang's. But is it even a hip-hop record? Or is it just the first funk record to have recognizable rap verses? See, I'd like to say it is a hip-hop record, but that would make this a shorter video, so let's dig in a little bit deeper. When thinking about hip-hop records, we can't really go back much further than 1979. I mean, we could talk about Pigmeat Markham, we could talk about The Last Poets, we could talk about Lightning Rod and Hustlers Convention, and I will talk about all of those records later. But none of them are hip-hop records. Fatback have a compelling case, and while they're related to hip-hop, they aren't a hip-hop group. They're a funk band who just messed around with a little bit of rap. Really, it was the commercial success of Sugarhill Gang's Rapper's Delight that served as the starter pistol for the explosion of hip-hop we saw in the 80s. By the end of 1979, Enjoy Records had Grandmaster Flash on the books, Mercury had Kurtis Blow, and Sound of New York had Spoonie G. Both Rapper's Delight and King Tim III hit the charts in October, and by December, Kurtis Blow had Christmas rapping out. See, the pace of production was exploding. Trying to pinpoint the first record in the tsunami wave of production that followed Rapper's Delight is an impossible task. See, we know about King Tim III and Rapper's Delight because both of them charted, but the releases that followed didn't have the same commercial success, so it's hard to track down exactly what was pressed when. Any help in pinning down the timeline in comments would be really useful. My current bet for the first record post Rapper's Delight is the Funky 4+1's Rappin' and Rockin' the House. I've heard it repeated in multiple places that Super Rappin' was the next record after Rapper's Delight, but again, I also know that Sound of New York, Golden Flamingo, and Mercury were hot on their heels. And this feels like the hard part. We found an easy story to tell in Rapper's Delight, but they weren't an established hip-hop group. And it was really just a disco rap record from an unknown entity and an unknown label. They weren't even the first rap record, long beaten to that title. So, what was the first rap record? Well, that's a story for another time. And as always, thanks for watching. So I went into this thinking this is going to be easy, it's going to be cut and dry, it's going to be King Tim III, or we're going to find out that some minor act released a record before Rapper's Delight. But it turned out to be a lot more complicated and a lot more nuanced than that.